So thanks everybody for joining this evening and joining us to chat about the blue card and Rowans Law and what that means to rugby in Ontario. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ryan Jones, Rugby Development Manager with Rugby Ontario. And we've also got David Bushell as well.
Hey everybody.
I'll let David just introduce himself.
Hey everybody, it's David Bushell, match official coordinator here.
So today we're going to be chatting about the blue card, where it fits, how it works, why it's there. We'll also talk about some of the processes that we're putting in place at matches and some of the behind the scenes, what happens after the fact. Some of the outcomes for today's session. We want to understand what the blue card is and why it's being implemented. We want to understand the process of the blue card and the roles of the players, coaches, medical staff, match officials, those involved in the game. Know where to go to find information on how to recognize the signs and symptoms of a suspected concussion. Develop a communication plan for match day, and then also know where to go to find additional information. First things first, what is a blue card? So it's an on-field process to identify a player with a suspected concussion, and it triggers an off-field process to ensure the correct return to play protocols are followed. Essentially, it's recognize and remove, but we've added a card and the off-field process. Where's it going to be applied? So it's applied to sanctioned Rugby Ontario competitions and events that are held in Ontario for all junior and senior rugby. Rugby Ontario doesn't have jurisdiction over the university rugby or college rugby or high school rugby, so it will not be applied there at this point in time. But anywhere where there's an appointed match official at Rugby Ontario club events, whether that's junior or senior, men and women, 7s, 15s, the blue card will be involved. We ran a pilot last year in the Owl and the Marshall. There were 7 blue cards reported. 2 players were not diagnosed with a concussion when they were sent to the doctor, and there was an average of 10 days between the assessment and clearance. Why the blue card? First and foremost, it's to put player welfare at the forefront of our game, and it's a requirement of Rowans Law. For those of you who don't know what Rowans Law is, it's a law that was passed by the Ontario government in 2018. It's aimed at concussion awareness and concussion management for sport organizations and schools across the province. Some of the requirements that Rugby Ontario has, and therefore member clubs have under Rowans Law, are to review the Ontario concussion awareness resources. We've made it mandatory for all athletes participating in rugby in Ontario to review these documents. Also to implement and have reviewed a concussion code of conduct. And now both of those, anyone who registers, identify that they've read and understand those resources. And then as of July 1st, 2020, we need a removal from sport protocol and a return to sport protocol that involves a medical professional. So what is the process of the blue card? So a player is removed from the field of play for a suspected concussion and shown a blue card if appropriate. If the athlete is laying on the field, we're not going to hold up a blue card over top of them. What we'll likely do is have a conversation with the coach and let the coach know that the player has been blue carded. The player with a suspected concussion is required to leave the field of play immediately and cannot return to that match. So that's just simply recognize and remove, which has been in play for a number of years now. We've just put a process in place for recognize and remove to happen. And also a note on that, there's no such thing as a sideline head injury assessment or an HIA at any club rugby events in Ontario or in Canada. So there's no head injury assessment on the sideline. If we recognize the signs and symptoms of a concussion, we remove the player with that suspected concussion. Next, the match official post-match will put in an injury report and identify that the player has been blue carded. They'll identify which player. That report will send an email to Rugby Ontario, which will then trigger Rugby Ontario to send an email to the individual and the club, notifying them that they're stood down from any rugby until clearance is provided. And then the player issued with the blue card cannot return to play without receiving written medical clearance from a medical professional. A little bit about the roles of the individuals and what that looks like. We've tweaked and changed this slightly from the pilot last year. We're really looking at a collaborative approach. It's everybody's responsibility to recognize and remove players with a suspected concussion. The role of everybody on the day and on the day of the match. Pre-match, we want to ensure that everybody's aware that the blue card's in effect and we meet prior to kickoff. This should be included in the captain's chat, but it can also be in the form of a coach's meeting prior to the match as well. During the match, it's the role of everybody to recognize and remove players with a suspected concussion. And then post-match, we want to ensure that the information of a player with a suspected concussion is correct and confirm that there's no additional players to be added to the injury report. Again, a little bit different this year. We're really looking for this to be a community approach as opposed to the sole provider of the blue card is the match official. We don't want to put match officials on an island. The individual roles of the match official is to show the blue card to a player who is suspected of a concussion, again, if that's appropriate. They also need to make note of key information regarding the incident, which includes the player's name, the injury type, who removed the player, if the player was taken to hospital, if you know that information, the score, and then also the time in the game. We are also looking at adding in a notes section to this. I am going to throw it over to David quickly here to chat a little bit more about this and some of the work that he's done on it.
Yeah, so something I've done, we had previously for last year, we had a PDF guide in order to give everybody a couple more options for engaging how to put in a blue card on the match official side. I've created a video walkthrough, which I'm actually doing for a number of the Sport Limo features. And yeah, so that will be another option for people to be able to take a look at that. I think, Ryan, you covered everything else. The only other thing I will note is that blue cards will be provided to all match officials, because I just had a question about that here. It seems like a good time to answer. Originally, we were planning on distributing them at our development meetings, which were scheduled for sort of start of this month and end of this month. Obviously, we can't run those now, so we're looking at other options closer to when we're back to running rugby. But rest assured, every match official has a blue card with their name on it already, so no worries there. Back to you, Ryan.
So now the individual roles of the coach, player, and medical staff. So key here is assisting the match officials in recognizing and removing a player with a suspected concussion. It is not just the job of the match official to recognize and remove athletes with a suspected concussion. In many situations, a suspected concussion could occur and the match official's turned away and is following the play in a different direction, and the player's signs and symptoms appear behind the scenes. In that case, maybe it's an athletic therapist or a coach or another player, a teammate, who identifies that that player may need to be removed from the field of play. Additional roles, so communicate with the match official if you believe a player has a suspected concussion. In some cases, we may want to actually come onto the field and protect that player as well. Athletic therapists and medical staff are already able to do this. It's just if you do recognize that someone is on the field and you believe they have a suspected concussion, please go onto the field, protect that individual, and ensure that they don't get involved in a game if you feel like that they have a suspected concussion. And then post-match, ensuring that the information given to the match official is correct to be included in the match report. And then ensuring that a player who is inactive does not participate in any rugby activity before they're cleared. So a player who is blue carded will be made inactive and unable to be put onto the team sheet within Sport Lomo, and therefore should not participate in any sanctioned rugby competitions until they're cleared to do so and made active again. Pre-match, the match official, coach, medical staff, and players should ensure that they know that the blue card's in effect and answer any questions that anybody may have. During the match, if you suspect a concussion, communicate with those involved in the game. If in doubt, sit them out. If we think a player has a concussion, if we suspect a concussion, pull them off the field, and that player is blue carded, and then they'll go follow the protocol. Some questions that we could ask: are you okay for the player to continue in this match? And then, is this a recognize and remove situation? If we're not okay with the player to continue to play, and we believe this is a recognize and remove situation, then the player should be blue carded and taken off the field of play. And then post-match, again, communicate with the match official to ensure that the correct player is included in the match report. Okay, so jumping over to the signs and symptoms of a suspected concussion. So here we'll use the tools that the World Rugby provide. I'm going to flip the screen in a second here, but it's a requirement of all coaches, medical staff, anybody who's involved in the game should be taking the concussion management for the general public. So this is the landing page for the concussion management for the general public. So we won't go through these in detail, but I would strongly recommend you going through this online module and really looking at and understanding some of the signs and symptoms of a suspected concussion, some of the visual cues, and some of the things that the players will tell you as well. Just a quick note on baseline testing, as this came up in the previous webinar. So Parachute Canada, who have helped us a lot with this protocol and process with the blue card, and we're also the ones who helped to write the Rowans Law resources, came out with a note on baseline testing. Essentially, baseline testing and mandatory preseason testing is not recommended at this point in time. There's not enough evidence to suggest that it should be used. Okay, so now the blue card has been given to the player. The player has been removed from the field of play. The match official post-match submits the report. Rugby Ontario will then send an email to the player, parent, and club executive indicating that the player stood down from all competition, and it also provides the next steps for those involved at the club. The player is then to visit a medical professional with a medical assessment letter and then submit that signed medical assessment letter to Rugby Ontario and their club. The player will continue the graduated return to play protocol. And then once the player reaches stage 4 of the graduated return to play protocol, they need to return back to a medical professional to have the medical clearance letter signed before they can progress onto stage 5 of the graduated return to play protocol. And then once that's submitted to Rugby Ontario, they'll be made active within the system. We will look into the graduated return to play protocol in a second, but stage 5 is full contact practice, not gameplay. So the athlete, once they receive medical clearance, still need to have at least one full contact practice prior to entering into a game, which is why that we've asked the medical clearance letter to be submitted by 5 p.m. 2 business days prior to the player playing a match. So if a match is on a Wednesday, clearance is to be submitted on the Monday at 5 p.m. All the information on the blue card can be found on our website. There's some brief information, introduction, what is a blue card, what's a concussion, a little bit of information around the pilot. Okay, and then we've got some resources. So the main resource here is the protocols and implementation procedures, which looks like this. So this is the document here. This is everything that you'll need to know about the blue card. This is a great resource for you to really understand everything around Rowans Law, blue cards, the on-field processes, the procedures, the graduated return to play programs in there as well. We've also got some key points for everybody who we believe needs to know sort of the quick facts on what to do if a player is blue carded. This is what the notification email looks like. So it'll have some match details. These are all the documents that will be attached to the email. Key points to note, and again, this email will get sent to the club executive, the coach, and the player, and if appropriate, a medical staff as well. The medical assessment letter that includes the player's name, results of the medical assessment if the player's been diagnosed with a concussion or if they have not, the medical clearance letter, the name and signature of the medical professional needs to be on these documents and submitted back to Rugby Ontario. And then some information around Rowans Law is in there as well. This is the graduated return to play. This has actually been updated as per Parachute Canada's recommendations. The update that we have in here is we just need to ensure that symptoms continue to improve or remain absent, where in the past the wording has been the individual is symptom free. In terms of the graduated return to play, so 6 stages. Stage 2 is split up into A and B. We talked a little bit about stage 5, full contact practice. Prior to entering stage 5, the player must obtain a signed copy of the medical clearance letter from a medical doctor or nurse practitioner clearing them of any concussion symptoms. That needs to be submitted 2 days prior to a match occurring. Okay, so additional information. So we've just taken you through the Blue Card website. All of those resources are listed on the Blue Card landing page there. There's also additional resources that can be found on the Government of Ontario website around Rowans Law, and then Rugby Canada's PlaySmart website as well.